Final Fantasy XVI was a feather in the hat of the eponymous series, which always manages to push out just one more fantasy, in direct opposition to its namesake. A divisive game, Final Fantasy XVI served to tell the tale of Valisthea, a world in which crystals dominated and those living off the land suffered under the addictive influence of the convenience of magic. Whilst the action combat drove a wedge between fans of the series, some crying out for the return of turn-based, and others lauding the change to action combat as a positive step forward for the series, with such a high production value, DLC was a no-brainer. Confirmed relatively early after release, and officially announced in December of 2023, 2 DLC set their sights on expanding the world and lore of Valisthea, Echoes of the Fallen, and the Rising Tide. Today, we are going to look at Echoes of the Fallen, a relatively short venture into the Sage Spire, a relic of the Fallen, ancestors of the current humans whose society is said to have been struck down for defying God. The tale commences with the appearance of a new type of crystal that, whilst act as a conduit of ether for the purposes of casting magic, have a fraction of the capabilities of pure crystals. The arrival of these artifacts across the marketplaces of the twins bodes ill and raises concern for Sid and his band of outlaws, as the appearance of these crystals could only mean one thing. Perhaps in their rush to break the shackles of Ultima, who tied humans to a never-ending cycle of war, they had missed a Mothercrystal? Echoes of the Fallen can only be undertaken if you are at the point in the game where Origin has arisen from the ruins of Twinside, and if you have completed the 2 side quests, Where There's a Will and Priceless. These 2 quests place Joshua and Jill into Clive's party permanently for any adventures he undertakes up to the point where he leaves for Origin. I had done the former quest, and not the latter, so had to do a bit of tidy up before I could undertake the DLC. I will note that while some people disparage the side quests in this game, ones that are linked in a chain, or ones that are character specific at the end of the game, have great payoff. Not only do you typically get a splendor that you can view later in the hideaway, and a letter from the person that you assisted, but you also bear witness to a generally heartwarming moment which fleshes out the side characters far more than if you had just avoided these quests entirely. The DLC begins with Karen being perturbed by a new type of crystal that has started to flood the public markets. Dusk crystals, a much less reliable substitute for normal crystals, and very concerning given that all the mother crystals had been destroyed to this point. After a sudden quake that rocks the headquarters, which results in a fallen structure overlooking Rosaria beginning to glow almost ominously, Clive makes it his mission to explore why the dust crystals have appeared, and where they came from. Clive's initial investigation takes him to Port Isolde, where he encounters some shady characters, slippery as a Malbora's tentacle, which evade pursuit and capture a couple of times until they lead Clive to the bottom of Sage Spire, a large white tower of fallen origin, rising from the despair of the dim. When you tread gingerly over the threshold of Sage Spire, one of the first things that you will notice is the sheer grandeur of the establishment built by those who sought to topple God. With the design and intercrossing webs of material supporting the central pillar, it's not difficult to draw conclusions that this structure may be linked to the underground network of towers that belong to the Apothecary, where Phoenix and Ifrit waged war at the beginning of the game. You'll also notice that magic can be used within the walls of the spire, despite it being situated within a blighted area on the border of Eastpool, devoid of ether. The last thing you may notice is the sheer juxtaposition of the advancement of the Fallen to the current people of Valisthea, who so ardently rely on magic to live comfortable lives. However, the cold, hollow voice of the tower echoes the fallacy of Ultima not only in tone, but also in the bereavement of emotion and inflections necessary to understand the intricacies of humanity. Where the tower is an entity with the sole purpose of protecting its treasure, Ultima is not unlike this, seeking to work toward a goal with the same vacuous notions, devoid of empathy or humility. I liked this as it helped to show how similar Ultima truly is to its creations. Within the confines of the ancient structures supporting the appearance of a Mothercrystal are creatures both fey and man-made. Other than an ability that some enemies can use that's called Hearthflame, which places a magic barrier around a target repelling any physical attack back to damage Clive's health, there is nothing really new to combat worth mentioning that we will see in this DLC. The layout and progression of the dungeon, however, was well executed, with challenging bosses along the way that were absent from the trip into Origin. If you felt like the lack of a final dungeon hurt Final Fantasy XVI's ending, you can feel satisfied with this romp, which not only provides great lore on the Fallen, but also some nice challenging bosses very similar in design to the mechanics of some memorable battles from Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoyed climbing the tower and getting to the airship dock where you could look out over the landscape of Rosaria and see, at length, the distances between locations of historic significance in Clive's life, such as the glimmering spires of Rosalith Castle, and the giant crater nestled in the bosom of Phoenix Gate. Additionally, the slow progression of hard, inorganic materials dotting the walls to that of organic flesh as you get higher made me feel a level of dread for what would appear at the top, considering the captured creatures and experimentation that had gone rampant, echoing the acts of the Allagans in Final Fantasy XIV. Basically, if Final Fantasy XIV had a collaboration that appeared in Final Fantasy XVI, this is it. Now, I've talked about the Fallen here a bit, but what are they exactly? History tells us that they are a race of rapacious, advanced beings that were struck from the earth by God. They could manufacture materials that far exceed the alchemy necessary to reproduce in the forges or factories of current humans. They also had great wonders of flight, airships that are now sitting derelict across the landscape, untouched by the encroachment of the Blight, and repurposed as homes for those that have been displaced by the warring governments of the lands of Storm and Ash. There isn't a lot articulated in-game about what exactly the Fallen are, as most of the information is contained within lore assets accessed by speaking with Hippocrates. We do know of one past instance, however, where a Mothercrystal was destroyed prior to the events of the game. However, rather than being an act to inspire humans toward a similar goal, and setting fate in motion, the act was performed by Ultima itself when the Fallen decided to assault Demechus. The result of that war with God is Demechus Falls, a large bottomless crater that's continuously fed by the waters of the ocean, yet never fills. A testament to the fallacy of humans and their weakness in the form of greed and envy. Music is the final thing that I wanted to talk about, though it's not the finality of a bell tolling in the darkness. There are a couple of new tracks that use light motifs from Azazlar's theme, Order Yet Undeciphered, and Omega's theme, Escape, harkening back once more to Final Fantasy XIV. I was smiling from ear to ear when I realised where the melodies had originated from, as I couldn't quite place them the first time I heard them. As per the base game, the voice acting is phenomenal, and kudos must be given to Ben Starr, Jonathan Case, and Susanna Fielding, who play Clive, Joshua, and Jill respectively. It was nice to have the three of them together, bantering with each other with little quips that were absent in the base game, due to them not travelling together, or the situation being too dark for them to have made said comments. Echoes of the Fallen sits smugly within a couple of hours, just long enough to be recalled as a memory that echoes, but easily forgotten like the dream of someone freshly awoken. Whilst the experience is short and didn't give anything new in terms of story and character development, the extra information about the Fallen was a welcome slice of chocobo romp that wasn't necessary, but was very welcome. I also enjoyed the excuse to return to Rosaria one last time, a place that bore memories both good and bad for Clive. Whilst the game may not be worth the price tag to some, I didn't mind the cost and purchased it within the DLC bundle, so we'll be able to play the Rising Tide when it gets released later in the year. If you are a fan of the original Final Fantasy XVI base game, then I would highly recommend picking this up. By the way, I typically don't tend to return to games when DLC come out because I generally have moved on to something else. What about you? Do you like to return and play DLC the moment it comes out? Or do you prefer to play it only as a complete bundle, much further down the line? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venwar with a review of Final Fantasy XVI, Echoes of the Fallen. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch my video, I appreciate you and I hope to see you again soon. Take care and bye bye for now.